Good morning, everyone. Please take your seats. Thank you. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. How are you? I see some thumbs up. Come on, I need more. Howard? No, I'm joking. It's a beautiful day. It's a crisp autumn day in Geneva. It's very pleasant out there. We might get to spend some time out there eventually if we make good progress today. So let's set that as our ambition. It's lovely to see you all full of energy. So lots of positive progress over the past 2 days. We're very, very grateful. Let's keep that momentum going. We've got lots of work to do today. Time today is really very, very tight, very critically difficult, but I've got complete faith in you all. We've managed much harder things in our years together, so I'm sure that we can manage that today. The intention is to cover at least to continue to review clusters D and E from CRP1 this morning. So we have 3 hours ahead of us. I'd like us to at least review clusters D and E from CRP1. I'm hopeful, optimistic, certain that we will also be able to start approving sections of CRP2 so that we will be able to communicate those to the plenary session that will start later today. But we will start effectively this morning, continuing our review of cluster D in CRP1. I hope that's clear. I think on that note, we can simply get started. So some of you yesterday had already given me opening comments on paragraphs 36 and 39 of cluster D. I want to reassure you that we have captured those. They are here. I can look at them in front of me. You do not need to come in again on paragraphs 36 to 39 if you've already intervened. For those of you who have not yet intervened on paragraphs 36 to 39 of CRP1, then the floor is now open. Thank you. I am shocked at your reticence and shyness. I'm happy to move on to paragraphs 40 to 42. Maybe I can. Let's start with paragraphs 40 to 42. Canada, you have the floor.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, everyone. An absolutely beautiful day. I took a picture of the sky because it was so nice. We would just like to note that when we were discussing Cluster B, we suggested that we actually move paragraph 41 here from Cluster D into Cluster B because it's more about disbursement of funds than about governance, arguably. Thank you.
Canada, I think you will be delighted to hear that the first thing that I have on my notes under paragraph 41 is that Canada have requested this move to Cluster B. I don't even need to write it down. So thank you, Canada. So there's a suggestion from Canada to move paragraph 41 to Cluster B. I'd like reactions to that and any further comments on paragraphs 40 to 42. Thank you. I see IPLC 26. I want to clarify that we will take party comments on Cluster D, and then when we have party comments from Cluster D complete, I will open the floor to our non-parties to comment on all of Cluster D. I hope that's agreeable to you all. We will make time for that. Japan, you have the floor.
Thank you, Co-Chair. We support the suggestion made by Canada. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Japan. That's very helpful. I'm not seeing any other requests for the floor for 40 United Kingdom. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everybody. Yes, we would also support the suggestion made by Canada. Thank you.
Good, that's noted. Brazil, you have the floor.
Thank you, Co-Chair. Good morning to all. We would support the proposition, but we would like to know how the current reading of, what's the current reading of paragraph 41, please? Are we debating paragraph, are we negotiate text on paragraph 41? So when are we going to do that? Now?
Thank you, Brazil, for the question. Yes, so I think I'm hearing agreement that it should move to Cluster B, but you're absolutely right. I think we should negotiate the content of that paragraph now rather than do it later in plenary. Can I give a microphone to Brazil, please?
Yes, thank you. We will support paragraph 41 as it stands. Thank you.
Thank you all. I see no more requests for the floor on 40 to 42. So next group would be 43 to 45, please. Comments on CRP1, 43 to 45. Very good. The next grouping is CRP1, 46 to 48. Switzerland, you have the floor.
Thank you, Co-Chair. So in paragraph 46, we would make a small amendment. After open access to data, we would like to introduce in public databases. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Switzerland. I see the EU and then Australia. EU.
Thank you, co-chairs, and good morning, colleagues. Indeed, it's a beautiful day. And I hope it will be a short day for our work here. We do have a concern with paragraph 47. We did, in our initial comments, already indicate that we didn't think it was a good idea that the DSI system would change the ways that public databases would be managed and operated. And I think that in that sense, we are not against that the mechanism should encourage the use of data governance guidelines, which encourages and so on and so forth. So I think that we would suggest to delete the first part of paragraph 37, that the paragraph would start, the mechanism should encourage the use of data governance guidelines. Thank you.
Thank you, European Union. So just to be really clear, you would delete the first part of paragraph 47, and it would start, the mechanism should encourage. Does that also mean that you're suggesting we should delete agree and? Thank you. So, colleagues, the proposal from the EU is the mechanism, paragraph 47 would start, the mechanism should encourage the use of data governance guidelines, and so on. Welcome reflections on that. Australia, you have the floor.
Thank you and good morning, Co-Chair and everyone here. We would support the inclusion by the European Union just made now on paragraph 47, or the deletion rather, and we just have a clarification question on 48. In the back end of that sentence, it says, traditional knowledge associated with the genetic resources and genetic resources, and we're not quite sure about this phrasing. We think that I'm not sure if the concepts are jumbled or split up for a reason, but we would just seek to clarify this language. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Australia. So on the face of it, I mean, I'm not going to intend to answer this on behalf of the floor. I look to the floor to that. I mean, on the face of it, I think the sentence, its intent is to say data governance of the multilateral mechanism must respect the rights of indigenous peoples and local communities over there, and then it's a list, traditional knowledge associated with genetic resources and the rights of indigenous peoples and local communities over their genetic resources. I think that's the face of it reading, but I encourage the floor to reflect further. India followed by Canada. India, please.
Thank you, Chair. My intervention is related to paragraph 43. I was just wondering whether we should only be talking about paragraphs 9 and 10 of decision 15.9, or should we say that the operation of the multilateral mechanism should be monitored against the principles set out in decision 15.9, particularly paragraphs 9 and 10, because there are other paragraphs also which are linked to the operation of the multilateral mechanism, not only paragraphs 9 and 10. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, India, for that suggestion on paragraph 43. What I'll do is I'll give delegates a chance to reflect on paragraph 43. I'll gather a few more interventions on 46 to 48. So 46 to 48, Canada, please.
Thank you. Just very quickly, we support Switzerland's addition in paragraph 46 of in public databases and agree with the EU deletion of the text and that rationale. So we'd also noticed that agree and seemed unusual, so definitely prefer encourage the use of data governance guidelines. Thank you.
Thank you, Canada. Brazil, and then the Republic of Korea. Brazil.
Thank you, Chair. We supported the proposal by India in paragraph 43. And paragraph 46 and 47, we would request that they be moved as they stand to the elements, to the section of elements on which there is a need for further discussion, not because we oppose any of these elements, but because, as I have mentioned, I think at least once in this, that we need more time to discuss with our scientific community the implications of the provisions on data governance. So we would prefer that both paragraphs in their entirety be moved to the other section. Thank you.
Thank you, Brazil. Republic of Korea, and then European Union.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, colleagues. Yes, Korea also would like to support the inclusion suggested by Switzerland in paragraph 46, and also Korea would like to support the deletion, suggested deletion in paragraph 47 made by European Union. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Korea. So I'll take the EU and Namibia, and then we'll pause to take stock. European Union.
Thank you, Co-Chair. And to say that we can agree to the request by Brazil to move 47 and 48 to the issues for further discussions. However, that would mean that they would be reformatted in the sense of the comments that we have in the issues for further and to be accompanied by whether and how, as the case may be. Because otherwise it would actually mean that even if there are issues for further discussion, we're actually only discussing how this would be due. It's also whether. I think we would prefer if the 47 would actually be transferred in the form that we have suggested. But, and I also have to say that the same, and I forgot that in my initial, that we also requested the deletion in 48 of data governance of the multilateral mechanism, because I don't think that the multilateral mechanism will have a data governance as such, because the multilateral mechanism is not a data repository. It is sort of a mechanism for facilitating, promoting, and ensuring benefit sharing. So our preference would be, if we move both of them to issues for further consideration, that in both cases the initial half sentence would be removed. So in paragraph 47, until governance, and delete agree and in paragraph 48, remove the words data governance off and start it with the multilateral mechanism. And then in the issues for further discussion, accompany those two paragraphs by whether and how, because that means we have a full right to debate the suitability as such and the modalities of. On paragraph 43, I'm not sure to have captured entirely the Indian proposal, so I would wonder if you or the Secretariat could repeat the Indian proposal in its entirety, so that we can take a view on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, European Union. I'm going to take stock of where we're at on 46, 47, and 48 in a moment. I'll ask the Secretariat to read out the proposal on paragraph 43. Thank you.
Thank you, Co-Chair, and good morning to everybody. So paragraph 43, after India's suggestions, would read as follows. The operation of the multilateral mechanism should be monitored against the principles set out in Decision 15/9, particularly paragraphs 9 and 10.
I'm going to take Namibia. I see NGO 28, just to reassure our non-parties and observers, you will have a chance to intervene on all of Cluster D when we finish this reading. I'm going to take Namibia, and then we're going to take stock. Namibia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. Namibia, on behalf of Africa, would, on para 48, would like to, we didn't really get the reflection and the explanation that was given in terms of the whole para as it stands, you know, the double reading of it. So we would like to hear more on what that para exactly entails in terms of the clarification that you gave. And then for paras 46 and 47, Africa would be comfortable that we move this to the areas for further discussion so that we can have more reflection to it, just to assess in terms of the consistency or inconsistency of whether we have enough evidence out there on the current operations and how best we can move forward. So we would really like to see that this be moved for further discussions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Namibia. I'm going to break my own rule and give the floor to Norway, and then we'll take stock.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So regarding 43 as proposed by India and supported by Brazil, I've been having a look at decision 15.9, and I can't see any other principles or criteria, because it doesn't say that they're principles, but I think we've named them so in the past. So I can't see what other sort of principles that are relevant in that decision from a monitoring point of view. So I was wondering what kind of principles, other principles, is India referring to? Thank you.
Good. So let's take stock. Let's spend time on paragraph 43. We've heard a suggestion from India, which has had some support from the floor. Norway now asking for clarification from India on what other parts of decision 15.9 could serve as the principles that are being referred to. So maybe I could ask India to take the floor to respond on that. Thank you, India.
So our point was that when we talk about the operation of the multilateral mechanism should be monitored against the principles. Basically, then we are looking into the entire thing in totality. We are looking into all the decisions of 15.9. It's not only paragraphs 9 and 10, because the other paragraphs also talk about the benefit sharing, the components of the benefit sharing, the non-monetary, monetary. So all those things need to be monitored. So in a way, they are all interlinked. So that is why we are saying that the entire thing should be brought into focus, and then, of course, the main principles should be reiterated. That is the, thought which is going into this. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, India. I see on this, so paragraph 43, the Republic of Korea, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The paragraph 43 reads that the operation of the multilateral mechanism should be monitored against the principles set out. That's why in paragraphs 9 and 10 of specific paragraphs of decision 50/9. So Korea would like to support the suggestion made by Norway. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Korea. I see Colombia and then Argentina. Colombia.
Before I forget, I would like to support the decision made by Brazil and others to move the paragraphs 46 and 47 to further discussion. Regarding the paragraph 43, we support the position by India. It does need more clarification. It does give it more room to consider other aspects that are considered in decision 15.9. Thank you.
Thank you, Colombia. Argentina.
Thank you very much, Chair. As regards para 43, I think that India's explanation was very clear. I agree with their explanation. And I do think that it's necessary to highlight paragraphs 9 and 10 without losing the perspective on the general paragraph, where we included the provisions contained in those paragraphs. Decision 15.9 in itself includes a number of references that operate as the framework for the work that we have undertaken during this whole process for the establishment of the multilateral mechanism. So in this regard, I think it is appropriate for us to support the draft of para 43 as proposed by India. I also wanted to take this opportunity, now that I have the floor, in order to support Brazil's proposal to shift paras 46 and 47 to the events for further consideration part. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Argentina. So, I'm hearing support for the India proposal. And let me be clear what that is. The operation of the multilateral mechanism should be monitored against the principles set out in Decision 59, particularly paragraphs 9 and 10. I wonder if I can give the floor, they're requesting the floor, to Norway for further reflections. Norway, you have the floor.
No, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate the explanation from India, which was clear. And in my view, you know, because this deals with monitoring. In my view, it's the whole decision that should be monitored. But for the integrity of the multilateral mechanisms, it's paragraph 9 and 10 that are, in my view, of vital importance. So maybe we can, you know, try to merge those two views into a coherent sentence. I mean, I would say something like the operation of the multilateral mechanism should in particular be monitored against the principles set out in paragraphs 9 and 10 in decision 15/9, as well as other parts of the decision. Something along those lines. Not being a native speaker, that would be sort of my starting point. Thank you.
Norway, despite your nervousness about not being a native speaker, I found your proposal very fluent. Could you read it for us one more time?
Well, thank you. It was sort of made on the spot. So, so the operation of the multilateral mechanism should, in particular, be monitored against the principles set out in paragraphs 9 and 10 of decision 15/9, as well as other parts of the decision. Or it could be as well as other relevant parts of the decision, but then we have been caught in a discussion what's relevant or not. So.
Thank you, Norway. So I'll ask for reflections on that, but first I see the EU.
Thank you, Co-Chair. We felt that the Indian proposal achieved pretty much the same as the current Norwegian proposal, so we could have gone with the Indian proposal. We have nothing against the Norwegian proposal, but I think we don't see a major problem with the Indian proposal either. I apologize, I have to come back to paragraph 46. It's been very quick. You will have seen that we have asked for the deletion of where the multilateral mechanism has implications for data governance, because that's something that we feel very strongly about. So I think we would also ask for the removal of the same line in paragraph 46. Thank you.
Thank you, European Union, that's clear. I'm not detecting the strongest passionate feelings about the way that we handle paragraph 43, provided that we can ensure that there's a reference to the whole decision and in particular paragraphs 9 and 10. Norway, I wonder if you could respond to the European Union's suggestion that you're very good suggestion is actually set on trying to achieve the same thing as the Indian proposal. The Indian proposal, of course, has the benefit of being slightly shorter. Norway, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm happy to go along with the Indian proposal, hearing their explanation for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Norway. Your flexibility is really appreciated. Do I hear any objections then to the agreeing paragraph 43 as follows? The operation of the multilateral mechanism should be monitored against the principles set out in decision 15.9, particularly paragraphs 9 and 10. Wonderful. Let's move on. So we got to paragraph 46. Now, I think the first thing to say on the first thing to ask you on paragraph 46 is, let me phrase this correctly. Does anyone object to moving this to areas for further consideration? Is there an objection to moving it down? I haven't heard any objection to that. My wife is congratulating me on the handling of paragraph 43. I'm going to move my phone. I'm going to move my phone over here so I'm not distracted by that. Apparently, someone is watching at home. I had no idea. So we're going to propose. So I think we're in agreement that paragraph 46 will move down to areas for further consideration. That means that it will be phrased as a whether question. The question is whether it should start, whether the multilateral mechanism has implications for data governance. I don't think that makes any sense. So I think the proposal from the EU would be that the sentence should read, whether the mechanism should operate in a way that is consistent with open access to data, and does open access to data in public databases, Swiss, Canada, Korea proposal, and does not affect the current operations or working practices of public databases. I'm not sure that was very clear. Let me start again. Whether the mechanism should operate in a way that is consistent with open access to data, question mark, in public databases, and does not affect the current operations or working practices of public databases. Is that still clear? Brazil, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. As we mentioned earlier, we would like to have as many elements as possible to further discussion. So we would favor not to delete any text from the writing, or to keep all the elements on the table on this particular. Again, not because we have a special feeling for or against any of them, but because we need to have elements on the table to further discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Brazil. EU, you've asked for the floor.
Thank you. We do respect the right of our Brazilian colleagues to keep or to be precise on the questions we are. So I think what we would suggest is that there would be one issue to discuss, is whether the multilateral mechanism should have any implications for data governance, and then have another one to say whether and how the mechanism operates in a way, or should operate in a way, that is consistent with open access, the data, and so on and so forth. And then 47, whether the mechanism should agree and encourage. So that with that, moving the implications for data governance into a separate question. And then the sort of the last one, 48, is a little bit more tricky, because we think that, from our perspective, that the multilateral mechanism doesn't have data governance. So I think there we actually we'd need to find another formulation. Thank you.
Thank you, European Union. I appreciate your energy. We'll focus on paragraph 46. I'm hearing a suggestion that is a compromise, so that we can keep all of the text on the table, that we break paragraph 46 into two. The first paragraph would be whether the multilateral mechanism has implications for data governance. Do I hear any? Namibia, could I ask for you to lower your hand just for 1 second, just so I can ask the following question? I'll come right back to you. So is there any objection to the proposal whether the multilateral mechanism has implications for data governance? Do I see any objection to that as a formulation? Good, I think that's a good compromise. And then the next sentence would be, this is all areas for further consideration, whether and how the mechanism should operate in a way that is consistent with open access to data in public databases and does not affect the current operations or working practices of public databases. Any objections to that formulation? Argentina, you have the floor.
Gracias.
Thank you, Chair. I think that in this particular case, our preference would be to support the drafting of Decision 15.9 in paragraph 9 to be consistent with open access to data. And that without adding anything further to the following text. Now, as regards the draft that has been suggested, we don't have any objection, although we would prefer leaving them all together in the same paragraph as proposed. Thank you.
Thank you, Argentina, and thank you for your flexibility on the split. European Union, you have the floor.
Thank you. I mean, Argentina is correct that the paragraph 46 is partially a quote from Decision 15.9. So I think there is still a way to adapt it to say either we keep the first part, the sentence, the mechanism should operate in a way that is consistent with open access to data, as it is a quote from 15.9 in paragraph 46, and keep it where it is, because that's obviously convergence. And we actually move the third part of paragraph 46, whether the mechanism should operate in a way that does not affect the current operations or working practices of public databases, into issues for further consideration. Because I think that's clearly something that it has been put on the table and is an issue for further consideration. So having said that, the fact that 15/9 already says that mechanisms should operate in a way that is consistent with open access to data, one might also consider that we don't need to repeat it at all. Thank you.
Thank you, colleagues. I've understood all your intentions. Let us draft that and replay it to you. Argentina, you're asking for the floor.
Thank you again, Chair, for allowing me a last comment before we try out the new draft. What I wanted to say is that I fully understand that on this point regarding para 46, although the reference to be consistent with open access to data is indeed an element that is agreed, it is nevertheless part and parcel of the paragraph and its linkage to the rest of the paragraph elements. In this connection, Chair, we believe that we should redraft the totality of the paragraph in such a way that we can keep elements for further consideration in there, because otherwise we lose the sense of what it is that we're trying to achieve or to weigh. The principles, the way in which the principles in paragraph 9 tie into these new elements that we are still trying to keep under consideration. So in that connection, Chair, and in agreement with the EU delegate who said that there is an agreement in regard to what is established by Decision 15/9, we believe that in this case, the result should be a unified subject matter or something that is subject to future discussion. So in this regard, I would prefer for both elements of the sentence, both the first as well as the second part that says where the multilateral mechanism has implications for data governance, and the following sentence that says should operate, etc. I think as stating this as a question in the new draft should be one paragraph rather than two separate paragraphs. Thank you.
Thank you. Please, can we give the floor to the Secretariat?
Thank you, Co-Chair. So paragraph 46, which will be moved to the elements for further discussion, would now read whether the multilateral mechanism has implications for data governance, how the mechanism would operate in a way that is consistent with open access to data in public databases, and how the multilateral mechanism should operate in a way that does not affect the current operations or working practices of public databases. Thank you.
Is that formulation acceptable? We can repeat. Secretariat, please could you repeat the suggestion?
Whether the multilateral mechanism has implications for data governance, how the mechanism could operate in a way that is consistent with open access to data in public databases, and how the multilateral mechanism should operate in a way that does not affect the current operations or working practices of public databases.
So we've retained the three parts of current paragraph 46 and broken them into three questions. One question begins with a whether, and two questions begin with a how. Brazil, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. We believe the third question should begin with a how, please. The whether, sorry.
Colombia, you have the floor.
I had one small question. This is to, reformulate it, but to still move it to issues to further discussion. Yes, and the way that is written, we prefer to keep it together. That's how the discussion, if we split it up, the discussion, it will give the idea that the discussion is over. As it is right now, and the wording that you are using, yeah, we agree. Thank you.
Thank you, Colombia. EU, you have the floor.
Hearing the intervention by a Brazilian colleague, we would have preferred how. I think the compromise would be whether and how. Thank you.
Thank you, EU. I'll come to Brazil in a moment to ask their views on whether the sentence can start with whether and how. I'm sorry, interpreters. Chile, you have the floor.
Thank you, Co-Chair. I would like to hear again the last question, part of the question.
So the third part of those elements might now read whether and how the multilateral mechanism should operate in a way that does not affect the current operations or working practices in public databases.
And cannot be without the does affect the current. No, does not affect the current operation.
So linguistically, Chile, I think it's possible to say whether, sorry, Secretariat, sorry. I think it's possible for it to say whether and how the multilateral mechanism should operate in a way that affects the current operations or working practices of public databases. But that has a different meaning. Namibia, I'm sorry, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. Mr. Chairperson, Namibia would like to appreciate the insertions for the new formulation on para 46. But on behalf of Africa, whether we indicate whether and how, and all the other insertions. In fact, the last suggestion that you have made is very much appetizing to us, but we would still like to insist that we move this paragraph to issues to be discussed, to be further discussed, because we are not ready to work on this para or make any changes to it as yet. We would like to reflect and then come back with a proper suggestion, but for now we would really want it to be moved. Thank you.
Thank you, Namibia. Be assured it will be moved. There's agreement to moving it. And since it is an area for further consideration, we should wrap up and move on. Can I just check, Brazil, are you content with whether and how at the beginning of the sentence? Brazil.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not a native speaker. I'm a native English speaker. Shouldn't it be whether and if so, how, or something like that? I'm sorry, I'm at a loss here. I'm in your hands. Thank you.
That is perfect English, Brazil. It has a different intent. European Union, are you content with whether and if so, how?
Thank you, Chair. As you said, this is we are formulating questions for further discussion. And if that is indeed the preference from our Brazilian colleagues, who will not oppose it, we will I think I would slightly prefer whether or how instead of if so, because I think that from our perspective, we will debate both things. And just to react very quickly to Chile's proposal, we would very much insist on does not. Thank you.
I'm going to ask Brazil for their reflections on whether or how.
I would stay with the native English speaker opinion. Thank you, sir.
This is not simply a question of English, I'm afraid. I think there is a difference in intent. European Union, you said you might be able to be flexible. Could we accept whether, and if so, how?
I think then this if so can be implied in many other places as well, I just warn you. But I think that if the language of 46 otherwise stays exactly as read out by you, and in particular, if the word does not affect stays in place, we might in the end be able to agree to it. Thank you.
Thank you, European Union. I'm keen to move on, but I see United Kingdom and Togo. United Kingdom.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. If the agreement is to move on, then I don't need to make this point, but it's, I think, first of all, we ask the question whether, and then if the answer is yes, then we can move on to how. So I do think it makes sense to say whether, if so, how. I think that's a correct formulation. Thank you.
Thank you, UK. Togo, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair. Togo supports the proposal of Namibia made on behalf of the African group. And for us, the two if and how don't have the exact same application, legally speaking. So that's why we would rather have this deliberated on later such that we can have more information so we can finally take a position on it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Togo. That's very helpful. So paragraph 47, colleagues, next paragraph, will be moved. I want to be very clear, it will be moved to areas for further discussion, and it will say whether the mechanism should agree and encourage the use of data governance guidelines. And then it will continue. I trust this is acceptable. South Africa, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I was just back on 46, and I'd like to support that how should be left out. However, I see that you've moved on already, but if it's still allowed, I'd prefer that it remains as whether and not how. Thank you.
Thank you, South Africa. So that's on paragraph 46. Is that right?
Yes.
Are you able to be at all flexible on that?
It's difficult because how already preempts that it may be. Let's first decide whether or not. Thank you.
Thank you, South Africa. I think we have the phrasing whether and if so, how. So the if, I think, says it's trying not to prejudge whether it's possible. It says, so there's the whether it's possible, and then the how will only come up in the event that it is possible. So I think there's assurances built into it's not just whether and how, it's whether and if so, if it's possible, how would it be done? Is that sufficient? So South Africa's given me the thumbs up, which is always a good sign. Thank you, South Africa, that's very helpful. Paragraph 47, whether the mechanism should agree and encourage the use of data governance guidelines, moved to the areas for further consideration. Very good. Paragraph 48, I think the general consensus will be that we should move this to areas for further discussion. I heard that suggested by some. I'm going to tell me when you take the floor if I'm wrong. And I think it would read whether the multilateral mechanism should respect the rights of indigenous peoples and local communities over their traditional knowledge associated with genetic resources and genetic resources. Is that agreeable to you all? Let me sorry, colleagues. Let's start again. Can I take general comments on paragraph 48 as it stands would be very helpful. Let's reset a little bit. So general comments on paragraph 48, please. European Union, you have the floor.
Thank you. You will recall that we requested the removal of data governance because the multilateral mechanism as such will not have data governance. I think that it is clear to us that the operation of the multilateral mechanism must respect the rights of indigenous peoples and so on and so forth. So I think from my perspective, if it is to be moved to questions for further discussion, we would have a preference for how the multilateral mechanism would respect or maybe better to say how the multilateral mechanism in its operation or should operate. I think that's the language the Secretariat used for paragraph 6, how the multilateral mechanism would operate in a way that respects and so on and so forth. Thank you.
Thank you, European Union, for that helpful suggestion. So paragraph 48 would move to areas for further discussion and would say how the multilateral mechanism would operate in a way that respects the rights and so on. I see Colombia and then Guatemala.
Thank you, Co-Chair. Respect to paragraph 48, yes, it should be moved to areas for further discussion. We sort of agree with the EU with the part of how it should respect the, there should not be any questions about whether or not it should respect it, but it needs more discussion, the discussion about the rights and the relationship with the local governments. There is that interaction there that needs to be taken into account. So yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Colombia. Guatemala and then Norway.
Thank you very much, Chair. I feel somewhat concerned about this paragraph because I do think that it should be added, or we should add to it, the third objective of the convention. Since apparently we're not going to be mentioning the Nagoya Protocol at any moment, we nevertheless are all parties to it, and we should ensure its implementation as a third objective. So I think as a safeguard, we should include it in this paragraph in relation to data governance or in relation to any information, which, as Colombia said, is not necessarily related to the multilateral mechanism, but this data governance or information governance is something that indigenous peoples and local communities do actually implement. So I do think that we should keep this mention at the end of the text. In other words, the mention of the third objective of the convention. We also agree on moving it on to other areas for discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Guatemala. So I encourage other parties to react to that suggestion. Norway, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we as well don't see how the multilateral mechanism relates to data governance, because in our view it doesn't, sorry. We're fine with that the multilateral mechanism must respect the rights of indigenous peoples, local communities with their TK, and we're fine with the rest of the sentence as it reads, but would support the proposal made by the EU. Thank you.
Thank you, Norway. Republic of Korea and then Uganda.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I would like to make sure that there are two types of traditional knowledges. First one is a traditional knowledge associated with genetic resources, and traditional knowledge not associated with genetic resources. And traditional knowledge not associated with genetic resources are beyond the scope of CBD. And that is the first point I would like to make. And second one is most of the sovereignty of genetic resources belong to the national government, except subject to the domestic legislation. So the genetic resources over which IPSCs have the established rights in accordance with their domestic legislation. So I would like to make distinction here. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Korea. Uganda and then Belarus.
Thank you, Co-Chair. On paragraph 48, I take note of the submissions from Korea and the suggestions to delete the first part that reads data governance of. However, I think that the paragraph itself is stating what we have already converged on, that this mechanism that we are here to deliberate on must actually respect the rights of IPLCs over their traditional knowledge and over genetic resources. So I do not see why we should actually take it for areas where we do not converge. I think this is an area that we actually converge on because from the very beginning of this working group, we have agreed that this mechanism must respect the rights of indigenous peoples and local communities. So our submission is that we should retain it in these areas of convergence. Thank you, Chair.
Uganda, that's very clear, and it prompts a thought. I'll take Belarus, and then I'll try and suggest a way forward. Belarus, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair. I would like to join the voice of countries who have said that there's an improper use here of the sentence that the mechanism is being managed by this data. Here, the thing is that we have a multilateral mechanism, and so we're trying to identify the benefits and how those benefits are shared. So it's not exactly clear, the situation here. So that's why we would join our voice to those who have already spoken and suggest the deletion of this. And that will probably make it a little bit clearer and better as a paragraph. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. It's been very helpful. So the co-chairs would like to make a proposal. We'd like to propose 2 sentences. The first sentence is an area of convergence. The multilateral mechanism must respect the rights of IPLCs over their TK associated with genetic resources and genetic resources. So an area of convergence, the multilateral mechanism must respect those rights. And then an area for further discussion is how the multilateral mechanism would operate in a way that respects the rights of IPLCs and so on. Shall I repeat that proposal, or let me repeat that proposal? So one sentence at the top that says the multilateral mechanism must respect the rights of IPLCs and so on. And then in areas for discussion, how the multilateral mechanism would operate in a way that respects the rights of IPLCs. I see Togo, Canada, and Republic of Korea. It would be good to get your reflections on that proposal. Togo, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair. I agree with what has been said in your proposal, but I think that decision 15.9 already takes into account the basic principles of what's being laid out, the respect of the rights of IPLC, specifically in subparagraph I rather. So to link it with the respect of governance of data is not something that we think is necessary. However, we have a question. Are we talking about management of data, governance of data? I'm not quite sure about the wording here because it seems that it's data linked with DSI. So if we're talking about data linked to DSI, then it should be management of data, data management as opposed to governance. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Togo. Canada, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I think you've cracked it. I think that's a great way of separating it out. And it's also, just responding quickly to Togo, it's a nice way of continuing the thread of what we agreed in 15.9. So this section is about governance, but because there's a bit of conflation between governance of the fund and data governance issues, what we have here is an agreement on governance of the mechanism that it must respect those rights. But then in terms of how that relates to data governance, that needs further consideration, and so it belongs in that second part. So we support the way that you've separated these things out. I think it reflects where we need to go. Thank you.
Thank you, Canada. I see Korea and then Norway. Korea.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Yes, Korea also support the suggestion made by Canada, and also your proposal, first part, which is the mechanism should respect the general principles, respect to the rights of IPLCs over traditional Asia and traditional Asia associated generic resources and generic resources. And however, the second part, I would like to support the suggestion made by Canada of moving it to the further discussion. Thank you. Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Korea. Norway and then Namibia.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, or should I say doctor, because I think this was a very successful dissection or surgery procedure. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Norway. I am a doctor, but not that kind of doctor. Namibia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. Mr. Chairperson, Namibia would like to support the statement made by Uganda that actually we only need to move items where there is no convergence, but where there is convergence, as the African group, we are very comfortable and flexible to discuss it where it is. And then we would also like to indicate, Mr. Chairperson, that we support the separation of the sentence in terms of having the multilateral mechanism must respect the rights of indigenous peoples and so forth. And then the second part on how the mechanism will operate in a way that respects the rights of IPLC. So we're comfortable with that formulation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Namibia. Japan, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. Just for the sake of clarity, would you please kindly read out the paragraph 48 again? Thank you.
Thank you, Japan. So paragraph 48 would now read, the multilateral mechanism must respect the rights of indigenous peoples and local communities over their traditional knowledge associated with genetic resources and genetic resources. And then in areas of further discussion, it would read how the multilateral mechanism would operate in a way that respects the rights of indigenous peoples and local communities over their traditional knowledge associated with genetic resources and genetic resources. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I think we've solved 48, which is wonderful. So let's move quickly on 49 to 54. So any comments on paragraphs 49 to 54? Very good. Japan, you are asking for the floor, and it might be with reference to 48. Japan, please take the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. We raised the flag before you move on to 49. Our concern is that we still do not know how traditional knowledge itself is to be handled in the work we are engaged right now. This is our concern. That's why we are not quite sure we should include traditional knowledge itself in paragraph 48.
Thank you, Japan. I confer with my co-chair. I don't think the intent of the paragraph is to confer any new rights. It's simply to state that the multilateral mechanism must respect those rights which already exist. Floor to Japan, please.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. We follow the consensus. Thank you.
Thank you, Japan. That's very helpful. So, general discussion on 49 to 54, or just any points that really must be, taken into account. European Union.
Thank you, Chair. And again, it's a very well-crafted sections. I'm a little bit in difficulty over paragraph 50. Considering the fact that the Advisory Committee for Resource Mobilization, according to Decision 15.7, has as parts of its remit to answer the question of whether and how the financial mechanism that will be subject to its recommendation to the COP16 would be also the mechanism to deal with what we're dealing here. And I think we need to take into account the sequence of the work that we are planning to do in that regard, because the Advisory Committee on Resource Mobilization will actually, in principle, hold a meeting after the second meeting of the open-ended working group to look at the recommendations that come out of that one, and that will then make recommendations to the COP16 based on the work that we have done, but also taking into account the work that they will have done. So I'm wondering how this could be factored in to make clear that in the further discussion we would debate sort of our recommendations to the Advisory Committee and to the COP in that regard. So I'm wondering how that could be incorporated into paragraph 15, and perhaps to say what recommendations to make with regard to new and existing funds which could host a global fund. So I think that would be perhaps do it for us, but I think we somehow need to make clear that we're not alone on this one. There is another process going on that will look at it also from their side. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll take the UK, please.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. On paragraph 54, I find the chapeau quite complicated and wonder whether that could be simplified somewhat. A suggestion could read whether the factors for monitoring the operation of the mechanism should include.
Thank you, UK. Can you read that one more time?
Yes, of course. Whether the factors for monitoring the operation of the mechanism should include.
Thank you, UK. That's very helpful. Brazil, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure if I quite understood the proposal by the European Union. Our understanding is that paragraph 50 and 51 should be read together, to reflect the divergent views of many parties in this regard. So we would prefer to keep it as it stands, both paragraphs as they stand, because I think as they are, they reflect the compromise that was possible to reach at the discussions. It's clear that some parties want existing funds to host the new fund, other parties don't. That's why new or existing, it's an important element to be kept for us. And at the same time, paragraph 51 already has many elements that we wouldn't, we're not in favor of those elements, but we understood that for some parties that might be okay. So I appeal our colleagues to see if we can keep paragraph 50 and 51 together as they
can the floor be given to Brazil? Thank you.
Thank you. And since I have the floor, we would propose to have an additional paragraph that could be maybe, I don't know, 50 bis or 51 bis, that would read, how to ensure the Global Fund is consistent with principles of inclusivity and equity. Full stop. Brazil and many other parties mention that the governance of the new fund should be inclusive, and this particular word has been said over and over again, so it's important for us that it be in the document. Thank you.
Thank you, Brazil. Switzerland, you have the floor.
Thank you, Co-Chair. So I just wanted to express our support for the amendment or the suggestion of the European Union on paragraph 50, because we also think that the link to the work of the Advisory Committee on Resource Mobilization is a very important one, and so we support this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Switzerland. I'll hear from Norway, and then we'll take stock. Norway.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would also support the proposal made by the EU in 50. In 51, I have a proposal for insertion where it says options for or revisions to the operating modalities. I would add options for use of existing modalities, or, and then it would read revisions to the operating modalities of the GEF. So options for use of existing modalities or revisions. Thank you.
Thank you, Norway. India, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Just want to express our support for the proposal of Brazil, because we feel that both paras 50 and 51 in a way have to be dwelt upon to thrash out the modalities for the fund to be created, how it will be, actually made operational. So they do bring out certain aspects which would be lost if we sort of remove one of them. So I think we'll go by the proposal of Brazil. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, India. So I'm keen to keep us moving. So let's take stock a little. On paragraph 50, there was a suggestion from the European Union to somehow take into account the ongoing work of the Advisory Committee on Resource Mobilization. European Union, could I ask you to take the floor perhaps with a concrete drafting suggestion that we could suggest to the room? Thank you, EU.
Thank you very much, and I think I want to assure my Brazilian colleague that there is no intent to change in any way the subjects that we would discuss. But I think it's important that when we discuss, the open-ended working group takes into account, as you rightly say, Chair, the ongoing work of the Advisory Committee on Resource Mobilization. In particular, there will be a series of meetings until April, where many of those issues will already be discussed in detail. So I think that is something that we would want to be clearly mentioned. So maybe there, since it pertains to both 50 and 51, to construct a chapeau to say, discuss further comment, taking into account the ongoing work of the Advisory Committee for Resource Mobilization, and then options for, and then options for. And I think that probably the proposal made by Norway could also be taken into account. So that, I hope, would ensure that we would still not touch the different issues under discussion, but that we can make the link and that the further discussion is taking into account the work. And I think that in that sense, it would be quite important that we continue to have a close liaison between the two processes in view of coming to final recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, EU. So the proposal, Brazil observed that paragraphs 50 and 51 are a balanced pair. That balance is important to us. So the proposal from the European Union is to have a chapeau that would read, taking into account the ongoing work of the Advisory Committee on Resource Mobilization, and then it would be a colon, and I assume point A, 50A, would be options for newer existing funds, and option B would be options for, and we'll come to the Norwegian proposal, but options for revisions to the operating modalities. Brazil, is that a suggestion that could be acceptable to you? Mike to Brazil.
Sorry, Chair, I'm not sure I quite captured if this includes Norway's suggestions, how the reading should be. Can you read it again?
I'm sorry. So paragraph 50 would now start, taking into account the ongoing work of the Advisory Committee on Resource Mobilization, colon, point A, options for new or existing funds which could host the global fund, including how quickly they could be operational. New line B, options for, and then in square brackets, because this is the Norwegian proposal I don't want to hear about yet, we'll come to that, but options for, square bracket, use of existing modalities or, close square bracket, revisions to the operating modalities of the GEF or the Global Biodiversity Framework Fund under request from the COP to enable them to serve as the host of the Global Fund. Mike to Brazil, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. We could go along those proposals, but not with Norway's addition, because we prefer to keep the regional writing for the reasons I have already stated, to find balance between them. Thank you.
Thank you, Brazil. So I think that's a compromise on paragraph 50. Please raise your hand if you object to that compromise. Argentina, I'll come to you, and I'd like to hear your thoughts about the Norwegian insertion as well, if you have them. Thanks. Argentina, you have the floor.
Muchas.
Thank you very much, Chair. First of all, let me say that I would rather not include a chapeau concerning the advisory group. I think it's highly relevant, the work they've done. I'm a member of the advisory group, but I think in this particular case, providing a link between the work of one and the other could prejudge as to some of the results. I understand that whatever assessment is conducted within this group on the modalities of the fund should inform the discussions of the advisory group on resource mobilization. But I do understand as well that the process takes due account of developments that are happening in other areas of the convention. And we're not referring to them explicitly, although we understand that they are part of the process. For example, their work around Article 8J, and that will continue up to COP16. They are also part of the process in certain relevant points. So, Chair, I think it would be more advisable, so as to avoid an extensive enumeration where we start linking all of the ongoing processes, including those that do actually have some linkages. But I don't think they should be mentioned individually. Maybe we should refer just to ongoing processes or something along those lines, general language. That would be more acceptable. And maybe even could be part of the introduction, although I would say that it actually is already included, but maybe we could clarify that. Chair, if possible, I would also like to hear Norway's proposal once again so I can react to that one. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Argentina. Secretariat, could you read the Norwegian insertion? Thank you.
Yes. So paragraph currently 51 would read options for, open square bracket, use of existing modalities or, close the square bracket, revisions to the operating modalities of the Global Environmental Facility or the Global Biodiversity Framework Fund under request from the Conference of the Parties to enable them to serve as the host of the Global Fund. Thank you.
Sobre este punto pienso que...
On this item, Chair, I think that it's included in the question about existing funds. These are existing funds, so I see no point in highlighting Jeff, whereas it's actually included in the previous mention. I think it would be best not to make an individual mention of the Global Environment Fund, because otherwise we would have to individually list all of the other funds that may be included or could be the hosts. So I think a more general question on new or existing funds would be more adequate.
Thank you, Argentina. I'll give the floor to Indonesia and then the EU. Indonesia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for giving Indonesia the floor. Our comment would be on 50 and 51. At the outset, we would like to state our position that we don't want to prejudice so much. I mean, we don't want this paragraph to prejudice the right of our leaders, perhaps in the COP, for further negotiations and decisions. So we would like to record our position. We would rather not to have reference to the advisory group, and perhaps we could maintain 50 and 51 as it is. It has been, I think, proposed by Argentina as I think it's a good landing zone. To be honest, we even don't want to have to enable them to serve as the host of the Global Fund's language, but in the spirit of compromise, perhaps we are okay with this, but please just maintain as it is. It is still elements of where there is a need for further discussion, so it's still open. So we don't need to fight over this, in our opinion, as a way forward. Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair.
Thank you, Indonesia. I see EU and then Norway.
Chair, I'm a bit surprised. There are a multitude of processes that deal with genetic resources and DSI, and there are many areas where this is discussed. I agree with Argentina. But there is only one other process that is asked to answer exactly the same questions that we have to answer here. So, and that is why we need to refer to it here. I don't see how referring to a work that is done under the same convention, on the same question, is actually in any way a difficulty or can be seen as prejudging any outcome. So for us, it is important that we actually mention the link to the work of the Advisory Committee on Resource Mobilization in an explicit way, as the Advisory Committee on Resource Mobilization will very closely look at the discussions that we have had here. And I think that for that reason, we need to make that reference. And it actually doesn't change anything to the discussion, to the nature and the subjects of discussion here, but it makes it clear what actually we need to look at, especially in the material that will come out of the second meeting of the Advisory Committee on Resource Mobilization, scheduled to be held in March. And I think those are important elements that will inform our discussion here. So I don't think that anybody is fighting over this here. I think it's actually trying to make sure that the questions for further discussions or issues for further discussions are given the right frame. Thank you.
Thank you very much, European Union, and thank you, everyone. It's a very helpful exchange. I think there's a number of options in front of us. There's even options we haven't yet considered. I would like to suggest that a small group get together after the end of this meeting. I will come back to you with logistical arrangements shortly, but I'm keen that we move on. I'm sure that the small group of parties that will attend will be able to find a very constructive and sensible landing zone for paragraphs 50 and 51. I'd like to look at the Brazilian proposal for 51 bis, how to ensure the Global Fund is consistent with principles of inclusivity and equity. Now, I'm going to simply ask one question. Are there objections to the proposal from Brazil, how to ensure the Global Fund is consistent with principles of inclusivity and equity? Does anyone object to that insertion? Norway, you have the floor.
It's not an objection per se, but I would add as well as other principles, relevant principles, because otherwise it's always a whole, right? So I would broaden it a bit more out. Thank you.
Thank you, Norway. Japan, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. We think this inclusivity objectivity is a bit too far, going too far, because we cannot instruct Jeff to do this and do that. We could request Jeff only through COP decisions. So I'm some hesitation for this wording. Thank you.
Thank you, Japan. So my screen has lit up. There's a lot of interest in the Brazilian proposal. So I'd like to suggest that that's also discussed at the small group that will meet at lunchtime. So that small group will cover paragraph 50, 51, and the new Brazilian proposal, 51 bis. Thank you, everyone. So let's continue with comments on, or any comments on 52, 53, or 54. Uganda, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. My comment is on 54. We will go along with the amendment by the UK of paragraph 54, but I wanted to propose that what we do monitor should be monitoring performance rather than operation. So we could replace operation with performance and include a few other factors. And these would be additional to those three which are there, the ability to mobilize expected resources as one factor, because if it's not collecting significant amount of resources, then we will know that the mechanism is not performing well. And then the second one is how well the mechanism is handling issues that other parties are pertinent, are so particular about, including issues of bilateral arrangements, how well the mechanism is handling that. So those are two of the factors, the additional factors that we wanted to make. The Brazilian proposal in 52, if it refers to the mechanism, we could also include it as one of the factors, how inclusive the mechanism is. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Uganda. EU, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Just reflecting on the Ugandan proposal, I think it is correct and a good idea to also refer to monitor performance. I think that the issue of ability to mobilize resources is also correct. The third element that Uganda has mentioned is not acceptable to us, because we have not agreed that the issue that bilateral elements would be part of the multilateral mechanism. So if this is supposed to be somehow discussed, we need to find another place for it. I don't think it is something that is part of the discussion on governance. It's actually part of the other elements that we have under discussion, and probably is better housed in the context of the first part that we had on contributions to the fund, where I think we had quite a discussion on the relationship with the bilateral agreement, bilateral or the hybrid sector. So I think, if at all, that would be part of the discussion on hybrid mechanisms, not under governance. Thank you.
Thank you, EU. So let me turn to the Secretariat. We've had 2 suggestions for amendments to the chapeau. I'll ask the Secretariat to read those now.
Yeah. So the chapeau 254 might now read whether the factors for monitoring the performance of the mechanism should include.
Fantastic. Do I see objections to those amendments? I think they're acceptable. Norway, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, so this is where I, in the contact group, stated that the important thing here is this system, and that the list doesn't really make sense, which wasn't, so it wasn't, the paper wasn't revised based on that. So in a sense, 54 is in a way superfluous. My problem is that I don't really have a suggestion how to alter it now, but so my suggestion would be then to state whether the factors according to which the systemic operation of the mechanism could be monitored. So I would just add whether the factors according to which the systemic operation of the mechanism, and then we don't really have to do anything about the list. Thank you.
Thank you, Norway. We've captured that. Brazil, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. We are a bit concerned with 54C because I think we do not want to give the impression that we are discussing whether the rights of indigenous peoples and local communities over the traditional laws shall or shall not be respected. I think everyone is in agreement that they shall be respected, so maybe some reformulation is needed here. And since I have the floor, I would like to thank Japan for the comments on our proposal, because Japan has just confirmed that we cannot guarantee that the JEF will attend to principles of inclusivity and equity, and that's precisely why we cannot commit that the JEF will host a new fund. And that's why we are proposing this language, so that we can keep further discussion on options that could better address the need for inclusivity and equity. I'm certain that neither Japan, neither any other country in this room is against principles of inclusivity and equity. Thank you.
Thank you, Brazil. I'll hear from Uganda and Indonesia, please. Uganda.
Thank you, Co-Chair. This is just to clarify the concerns of the distinguished delegate from the EU. That what we were actually referring to were the national mechanisms for ABS as they are operating now, and how this mechanism will relate or will perform against the currently operating mechanisms at national level regarding ABS. So we take note of the concerns of the distinguished delegate of the EU, and just to clarify what I actually meant was not bilateral in terms of the mechanism that we are talking about. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Uganda. Indonesia, then the EU.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We also have some comment, I think, on 54C, because the way it stands now might be considered as we have don't have clarity that there are rights of the IPLC, and we don't think that's the case. So we think we should reconsider 54C to rephrase it as it should be. And another point on 55 bis, I think it was proposed by Brazil. We think we can support it. We fully support this proposal because inclusivity, it should be there. I'm sure everyone is supporting inclusivity. So we fully support the new 51 bis as proposed by Brazil. Thank you.
Thank you, Indonesia. European Union.
Thank you, Chair. I think we have had a long discussion on the fact that the new global fund that we would identify together with the Advisory Committee on Resource Mobilization would actually be under the authority and supervision of the Conference of the Parties. So just to confirm our understanding that the Conference of the Party has the power and the GEF has the ability to respond to the requests by the COP to do what it will be necessary. And I think we have had quite a good conversation on what type of governance arrangements we want. And we are confident that this will be possible. That is why, in a way, we are happy to continue discussing the issue that has been put forward for consideration by Brazil in that regard. On the issue raised by on 54C, we do recognize that this might give the wrong impression, and maybe we could solve it by a simple fix by starting C with how the rights have been respected. So we monitor the performance and the operation of the mechanism by a factor that said how the rights have been respected, and I think that is something that should clarify it in that regard. I have to say, and thank you very much to the colleague from Uganda for his explanation. I would have to see the exact formulation of that one to understand what is exactly meant. And I think that would be if Uganda has a sort of clear proposal, or whether the chair or secretariat, based on the proposal by Uganda, could actually work on a proposal that would enable us to understand what is exactly meant. Thank you.
Thank you, European Union. I have a long list. I don't think we've got time, in all honesty, to keep negotiating the details of the list. I think what the co-chairs will do in consultation with the Secretariat and a number of parties is formulate a version of the chapeau, which will effectively state that an area for further work will be the factors according to which the operation of the mechanism will be monitored. So we will remove the list because I don't think that there's a prospect in the next few hours of being able to agree that. We will, of course, mentally, we know that list. We are aware now that those are, factors that we imagine we might want to monitor, and we will move on in that way. Thank you very much. I'd like to ask for brief interventions from non-parties, observers, stakeholders on Cluster D in its entirety. We won't have time to react to those, but I'd like to hear them, and the co-chairs will take them into account, and then we'll move into Cluster E. Thank you very much. IPLC 14, you have the floor. Do identify yourself.
Kia ora, my name is Katie Lee. I'm speaking on behalf of the IIFB. There are continued references to a conclusion by the RTEG. We take their recommendations seriously, but remind the parties that RTEGs are not the final word in multilateral negotiations, which are in the hands of all the parties with inputs from observers. There was very little participation by Indigenous people and local communities in the RTEG. We have provided multiple ways in which we believe traditional knowledge and genetic resources are related to DSI. Our traditional knowledge is the subject of human rights, UNDRIP, and finalized decisions by the Convention and the Nagoya Protocol. We're having trouble to continue to accept assertions of the conclusions of an expert body that had limitations for Indigenous peoples and local communities' expert participation. We support further discussion and would like to provide further elaboration to all the parties. We thank the parties for their general support on Indigenous people and local communities with regard to data governance. We would just like to note that in our view there is a relationship between the issues discussed from 46 to 48 and the proposal to discuss the possibility of creating a family of interlinked databases under the mechanism mentioned under paragraph 53. In pointing to this, we would observe that if the idea moves forward, it would further emphasize the need for consideration of the principles and framework for open and responsible data governance that we've been raising. Finally, we thank the co-chairs and the contact group chairs for their approach and transparency regarding our participation. Thank you.
We thank you for your participation. Thank you for that helpful intervention. I'll take academic and research 19, and then we'll have to move on. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. My name is Aisha Gusrakaya, and I'm speaking on behalf of ITSE, interdisciplinary researchers working on digital sequence information. We will like to make a general intervention on the need for principles for open and responsible data governance sooner than later. The ambiguity on specifically applicable guidelines on data management and governance on digital sequence information, taking into account the existing rights and applicable legislation, is making our everyday work cumbersome. The lack of guidance from this forum increases unpredictability, while we have further agreements on open and responsible data governance in other fora, such as the BBNJ. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Your points are well noted. I'll give the floor to NGO 28. Then we'll move on.
Thank you, Co-Chair. We have a very brief intervention. Paragraph 48 has been split into point of convergence and a question. And if I'm correctly captured what has been finally agreed upon, there's no reference to data governance in both a point of convergence as well as in question. So perhaps in the end, we can add and data related thereto. And if parties converge, we can add it in the point of convergence, because we have an understanding that IPLCs have rights on data, their data as well. If that needs to be further discussed, then that can be added into the question part as well. I mean, it depends on what parties are inclined to. But just to have a clarity that we are talking about the data, I think explicit mention of data would be very useful. Thank you, Co-Chair, if the floor is inclined to consider our proposal. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Third World Network. So this is a suggested insertion into paragraph 48. The multilateral mechanism must respect the rights of IPLCs over their traditional knowledge associated with genetic resources, and data related thereto. Do I see any party support for that insertion, and data related thereto? Thank you, Belarus. We will take that into consideration. Thank you. I'm going to hand over to my co-chair to take us through cluster E. Thank you. I'm so sorry. Japan, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have the suggestion for paragraph 53, actually. We suggest to add the following language after the ending. The paragraph says the possibility of creating a family of linked databases under the mechanism. Then we suggest after this, comma, and also the possibility of database segmentation. We are suggesting this because we are concerned over the emergence of small databases or the data segmentation or data siloization. This emergence of small databases might deter the facilitated access to DSI. For this reason, we think this possibility must also be noted. Thank you.
Thank you, Japan. Could you read your addition one more time?
Thank you. Yes, I will read it slowly again. The possibility of creating a family of linked databases under the mechanism, comma, and also the possibility of database segmentation, full stop. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Togo, you're asking for the floor.
Oui, merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Chair. I understood that you were asking us to respond to 54, but then you were going to conclude actually without hearing the stakeholders on 52. So allow me to reply to 52, which speaks to the differences in governance of the mechanism and governance of the fund on the whole. For us, there is a difference here between the governance and the fund. We're trying to make things coherent here between the two, right? So we have a rewording or proposal for that, searching for coherence in the functioning of the mechanism on the whole and the governance of the fund should be in line with 15/9. Shall I repeat? The search for coherence in the mechanism on the whole and governance of the fund such that it be aligned with decision 15/9. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Togo. I might ask the Secretariat to repeat the suggestion on 52 one more time. Do you have it? I took it in French. You took it in French. Very good. Well, you can read it in French.
Well, I actually missed one bit. Je vais passer au français.
Okay, I'm going to read in French. So I just lost a small part of it, is that the search for coherence in the functioning of the system, the entire system, and then, I'm sorry, I didn't understand the rest, says the Secretariat. Togo, could you please continue after the and part?
Oui, voilà, merci. Le micro.
Yes, of course, yes, madam. So I will repeat. I said the search for coherence in the functioning of the mechanism on the whole and the governance of the fund, which should be aligned with decision 15/9. Which should be aligned with decision 15/9. Have you understood? Asked Togo. The Secretariat repeats the search for coherence in the functioning of the mechanism on the whole, and specifically the governance of the fund, as should be aligned with decision 15/9. Thank you, says the Secretary.
Thank you very much. So these are helpful suggestions from Togo and Japan. My concern is that these are areas for further discussion. We have a footnote on page 1 of the decision, which of the CRP, sorry, which I think makes clear that these are without prejudice to future discussions. I'm really keen that we move to cluster E. I see European Union. I'll give you the floor. My inclination at this late stage is to simply stick with 52 and 53 as they stand, but I'd like to hear whether that would be acceptable to the floor. European Union, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair, and you will remember that at the very beginning of our conversation, I said that we needed to be mindful that where it is necessary to include the famous weather and how, or whether, if so, how, whatever. And I think that I just, on the occasion of the discussion on the proposal by Japan, I discovered one paragraph where this is applicable, and that's paragraph 52. And I think paragraph 52 is particularly, sorry, paragraph 53. Paragraph 53. So this is a typical case of whether, and if so, how, to create a family of linked databases under the mechanisms, because I think we don't have an agreement that this is a desirable thing, and the language that is there sounds like we have already agreed, and it's just a question of how. So I think I would be grateful if that could be changed to whether, and if so, how, to create a family under the mechanism. Thank you very much. Just to say, the proposal by Togo, in my mind, would be an addition to would be a 52 bis, not a replacement of the 52. Thank you.
Thank you, EU. That's very helpful. I'll take 2 more interventions from India and Uganda, and then we will factor all of your contributions into the preparation of the next document. India, you have the floor.
Thank you, Co-Chair. I thought we're moving to the cluster E, but since it was open and suggestions have come for 52 and 53, I was trying to take this opportunity to also talk about 54, if you permit. So there's a wording which probably captures a formulation which may capture the discussion that we are having here on 54. If we remove the word whether and just start by saying the factors according to which the operation and performance of the mechanism could be monitored should include A, B, C, and the suggestion given by Brazil, then I think these are all, A, B, and C are basically the contours of the, the parameters on which the operation and performance could be monitored. And if we remove the word whether, the objection to C would also go away, and it would in fact help in setting the framework for the monitoring of operation and performance both. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, India. Uganda, and then we'll move on.
Thank you, Co-Chair. This is in response to the proposal by Japan. We appreciate the proposal by Japan, but we think that we will need really further discussions on that possibility of database segmentation, just to understand what this means actually. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Uganda. I'll give the floor to my co-chair.
Thank you very much, co-chair, and also delegates for the fruitful discussion on D. I hope we'll be able to move much faster on E, on relation to other approaches and systems. So we'll start with paragraphs 55 and 56, which as co-chairs, we consider these to be paragraphs of potential convergence. And we hope that maybe you also agree, but if you do not agree, then I'll ask you to take the floor and then provide the further elements on paragraph 55 and 56. The floor is open. I have Argentina followed by Chile.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Chair. I agree with the drafting of paragraphs 55 and 56. And I would like to request the inclusion of a reference to the World Intellectual Property Organization as one of the examples under para 56, which is presently addressing that subject. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to Chile.
Thank you, Co-Chair. First of all, we'd like to state our support for Argentina's proposal. And I'll switch to English.
The wording of Decision 15.9 of DSI include the recognition that any solution for the fair and equitable sharing of benefit from the use of DSI on genetic resources should be mutually supportive of and adaptable to other instruments and fora, while recognizing that other fora may develop a specialized approach. Based on this, we would like to propose some modifications to the wording on 56. So this will read, there needs to be ongoing, instead of coordination, we will say cooperation, and with the other forums that are considering and delete a solution on. They're considering benefit sharing from DSI. This continue until to ensure legal clarity, and at the end, we will delete mutual supportiveness and add enable the multilateral mechanism. This is text of, from the decision. Enable the multilateral mechanism be mutually supportive of and adaptable to other instruments, while recognizing that other fora may develop specialized approaches. Thank you, Chair. Co-Chair.
All right, so I'll just ask the Secretariat to read your proposal. From my understanding, you wanted to reflect the paragraph based on the decision that is already in 15/9, and also to replace coordination with cooperation. And then maybe you could also read it together with the proposal of Argentina, so that when people reflect, they reflect on both proposals.
With pleasure, Co-Chair, thank you. So the amended paragraph, paragraph 56 with the amendments proposed by Argentina and Chile would read as follows. There needs to be ongoing cooperation with the other forums that are considering benefit sharing from the use of digital sequence information on genetic resources, e.g. the International Treaty on Plant Genetic Resources for Food and Agriculture, the World Health Organization, the agreement under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea on the conservation and sustainable use of marine biological diversity of areas beyond national jurisdiction, WIPO, and UNESCO, close parentheses, to ensure legal clarity and enable the multilateral mechanism to be mutually supportive of and adaptable to other instruments, while recognizing that other forums may develop specialized approaches. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretariat. I'll give the floor to EU, then Colombia, and hopefully you should be able to react to also those proposals. EU, you have the floor.
Okay, sorry, I was confused. Thank you very much, Chair. And from my perspective, there are two comments on paragraphs 55 and 56. I'll start with 56 because there were a couple of other proposals there. It looks as if the proposal by Chile actually covers a concern that we had, and we will read it again, but I think the way it was sort of we heard it from the floor and from the Secretariat, looks to be okay. We are not sure that we are convinced that UNESCO is actually discussing solutions to benefit sharing from the use of DSI. So I think that, and there will not be any specialized approaches under UNESCO to DSI in that regard. I think that the same potentially applies to WIPO that has that one, but I think from my perspective, given the topical discussion that is going on there, we probably can accommodate that, but really very doubtful of whether UNESCO is really working on similar issues and should be mentioned in the 56. Now, on 55, we continue to have a sort of not be clear of what number of approaches under the Nagoya Protocol the multilateral mechanism could benefit from, and would perhaps, and we certainly agree that the listing of examples on non-monetary benefits is a good thing, so we leave that. But we would prefer to move the reference to benefit from a number of approaches under the Nagoya Protocol, such as community protocols, to the issues of for further discussion, saying whether the multilateral mechanism could benefit, and so on and so forth. I think we're not at this stage clear enough of what it means to have it under areas of convergence. Thank you.
Thank you, EU. I'll have Colombia, then Brazil.
Six, we fully support the comment made by Chile. I think it's important to leave it clear that there are DSI understood in different contexts by different organizations and different ongoing discussions, but there still need to be some sort of communication, some sort of supportiveness from the others. We also agree from some of the comments from the EU that in paragraph 55, it does need a list of examples to make it more clear. Nagoya is important, it's an ongoing protocol, it's been tested, so there are lessons that can be learned from it. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Colombia. Brazil, followed by UK.
Thank you, Chair. On paragraph 55, we would suggest that we would include not only examples of non-monetary benefits, but also of monetary benefits. So it would read, and the listing of examples of monetary and non-monetary benefits. We would also suggest the re-inclusion of two paragraphs that were in the non-paper and are not in this version, which we believe are important, and I don't think they haven't been questioned by any party, which were the fair and equitable sharing of benefits from the use of DSI on genetic resources is without prejudice to national access and benefit sharing measures. And the multilateral mechanism should not undermine the rights and responsibilities which exist under the protocol. These were in the previous version of the non-paper, and we suggest that it be re-included. On paragraph 56, we support Argentinian proposal to include the reference to WIPO, and we recall we mentioned explicitly WIPO missing from the presentations that were made from the Secretariat on ongoing discussions that could be relevant to our work, so we strongly support an inclusion to WIPO. And we also suggest adding some new language at the end of paragraph 56, saying, after mutual supportiveness, we would put a comma and say, and then respecting existing mandates and the obligations set out in Article 15 of the Convention and Article 5 of the Nagoya Protocol. I'll read it again, comma. After mutual supportiveness, in the end of paragraph 56, there would be a comma, and then respecting existing mandates and the obligations set out in Article 15 of the Convention and Article 5 of the Nagoya Protocol. Thank you.
Brazil, just to check, there was also a proposal from Chile to extend the last part of the paragraph. So is your proposal in addition to that, or it's separate from what Chile proposed? Maybe if you could also just clarify. You can come back. Okay, yeah, Brazil. Okay. Okay, fine. I'll have UK and then Republic of Korea.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. We think this is a really helpful paragraph. We've just got a couple of suggestions. We can support the addition of cooperation by Chile and also the removal of the reference to a solution. We're also not clear that UNESCO are dealing with the issue and would suggest that that would come out. And from the list of other forums, we see this list really as a bit of a mix between forums and agreements. So perhaps it could be more streamlined, and we could refer instead to the FAO, the WHO, and UNCLOS as the key forums, but we could also accept that WIPO are looking at related issues as well. So that would be, FAO would be replacing the text on the International Treaty on Plant Genetic Resources for Food and Agriculture. WHO remains as it is. And then the agreement under UNCLOS, so we refer to UNCLOS instead of the agreement itself. And on the Brazilian proposal, I would like a little bit more time to reflect upon that. But as a first reaction, I don't think we need to refer to articles of the Nagoya Protocol in this context. Thank you, Madam Co-Chair.
Thank you. So for paragraph 56 then, there seemed to be some support on the Chilean proposal to replace coordination with cooperation, to delete a solution on, and then there is the proposal by UK to refer to forums and not agreements so that we can streamline the text. And the last part is yet to be reflected upon. So as you comment, please also comment on these new proposals that have come so that we are able to get your position and be able to make a conclusion moving forward. So I have Republic of Korea, followed by Canada, then Switzerland. Republic of Korea.
Thank you, Madam Chair. With regard to the paragraph 55, yes, the multilateral mechanism could benefit from something. I'm not sure whether it is approaches or not under the Nagoya Protocol, such as the listing of examples, monetary and non-monetary benefits. And in this regard, Korea would like to support the suggestion made by Brazil, including the monetary. However, such as the community protocols in this regard is associated with the IPLCs, and especially in our protocol Article 12, says that customary laws, community protocols, and procedures. I'm not sure whether this includes none of these other rules and laws will be appropriate here. And also, I would like to make sure that the ITPJFA is not yet to confirm the use of the word GSD or DSI here. So I would like to make sure of it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. I now give the floor to Canada, then Switzerland. Canada.
Thank you. Let's see. So we think that the Chilean suggestion is very helpful, and we like the way that it's reflecting the decision 15.9 text on those points. The reference to UNESCO was our original proposal, and we had more in mind scientific capacity building at that point. So we're happy to have that removed in this context. That's fine. We can also support the reference to WIPO, given what they've been talking about. On the references to the Nagoya Protocol, certainly there are constructive things there, and of course they are directly from the Bonn guidelines as well. but we do tend to think that those things need further discussion. And with regard to Brazil's addition, let's see, about respecting existing mandates set out in Article 15 and Article 5, we don't think that's necessary here. And again, I think when you start bringing in the Nagoya Protocol, it's something that we don't necessarily have convergence on. But I would hope that we do generally, agree on the bulk of 56 as a point of convergence. We'd like to see that still maintained as something that we're all talking about. Thank you.
Thank you, Canada. I give the floor to Switzerland, then Norway.
Thank you, Co-Chair. So with regard to paragraph 55, for us it's also not very clear what these number of approaches exactly are, so the number of approaches on the Nagoya Protocol. We also understand that the listing of examples of non-monetary benefits could be helpful, but otherwise I think this is too vague for us, and so we would move this to the issues for further discussion. And also, we do not support the inclusions suggested by Brazil regarding references to the articles in the CBD and Nagoya Protocol. We don't think that this is needed here, and also we do not support the reference to the national measures. Regarding paragraph 56, we think that the amendments made by Gilly and others are helpful, and in particular also the suggestions to clarify the different, like whether they are agreements or different fora. I think this will be very helpful. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I give the floor to Norway, followed by South Africa.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Regarding 55, similar to EU and Switzerland, we think this could be moved down for further discussion. In addition to that, we don't really see that there's a lot of benefits from the approaches under the Nagoya Protocol, because that's the bilateral approach, which is not suitable for DSI. Regarding 56, we agree with insertion by Chile. Regarding the proposal from Argentina to include WIPO, we have a question there because the Secretariat in their presentation didn't include WIPO as one of the other forums, and I would like to hear the explanation why, because there might be a reasoning, I think there is a reasoning behind that WIPO wasn't mentioned. So I think for the benefit of all, that rationale could be submitted. Regarding the Brazilian insertions, we'd have to reflect on it, but from a starting point, I don't see the need to for those references to the Nagoya Protocol or Article 15 in the Convention. Thank you.
All right, I give the floor now to South Africa, followed by EU.
Thank you, Chair. We would like to align with the intervention made by Switzerland. I think we are on the same page on most. In terms of paragraph 55, reference to Nagoya Protocol, indeed, further discussion required, as well as then the last part of 56. We would like to see the Brazilian input. However, we would prefer to then keep them without the additions. However, and then we also would agree with the introduction of cooperation. However, we would like to keep coordination as well. So I think it's 55, also further discussion, and any reference to Nagoya Protocol or reference to bilateral would be further discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, South Africa. I give the floor to EU, then Namibia. EU.
Thank you. I will only comment on additional proposals made by Brazil. The two paragraphs that he referred to were subject to a discussion, and it was stated there that they were actually paraphrasing elements of Decision 59, and we are not comfortable with bringing in selective quotes of paragraph 59 in this list. I think that it is covered by the framework text that the co-chairs have for this one. I think if at all there can be a specific reference to say that the relation to other approaches and systems shall be governed by the principles set out in Decision 15.9, and I think that would be the maximum of what we would be able to accept. I think that the addition at the end of paragraph 56, again, I think are paraphrasing to a degree things that we have already said in other decisions, and I think that I don't see a good reason for adding yet again a reference to the obligations of the Convention and especially the Nagoya Protocol, so no to that one as well. But we certainly think that the listing of examples of monetary benefits as suggested by Brazil could be helpful, so I think no objection to having this included in paragraph 55, as long as the reference to the approaches under the Nagoya Protocol is moved to issues for further discussions. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll now have Namibia, then Togo. Namibia.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. On 55, Namibia would like to support, on behalf of the African group, the reflections that were made by South Africa. However, we would like to emphasize that there is a need to keep community protocols. Maybe we can add where applicable as part of that sentence, and then we would also like to support the insertion of Brazil that relates to monetary and non-monetary benefits. On 56, Madam Co-Chair, in terms of the need for ongoing coordination with other forums that are considering a solution on benefit sharing from the use of DSI on genetic resources, Africa is of the view that this will be a new and innovative model under the CBD, and thus need further discussions regarding the overall coordination of the process. We can agree with replacing agreement with forums, but we would like to retain coordination and collaboration, because our belief is that when you talk about coordination, it looks more at the harmonious functioning of having an effective outcome on the process. So thank you, Madam Co-Chair.
Thank you, Namibia. I give the floor to Togo, then Morocco.
Merci.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. On 55, we support the proposal from Brazil and to add the non-monetary benefits. And to move towards a consensus, perhaps we could bring this paragraph, make it closer to 61, which talks about potential conflicts under the Nagoya Protocol. But we do have some ideas under the Nagoya Protocol and the implementation of the 3 objectives of the objective. Even if it's cross-cutting, there are still practical experiences that the new mechanism could use to as an inspiration. So in case of need, perhaps we could discuss those later. Then on 55, we are asking ourselves the same question as the EU is on the relevance of including UNESCO, given that we're not sure that it's really a specialized agency that speaks of DSI, with regard to UNESCO at least. So we would suggest deleting UNESCO. And then we also support Namibia's proposal on thinking more about applications when we talk about cooperation or coordination. Does that mean the same thing in legal terms, cooperation or coordination? Is it the same thing? So perhaps we could understand which term would be the best legally speaking. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I have a long list on this one, so I'll just take the countries that are on the list now, and then we'll close and propose a way forward. I'll have Morocco, Japan, Republic of Korea, Colombia, Indonesia, Argentina, India, and Cuba. And that will be it for this section of discussion. And after that, we'll propose a way forward, because we see that on 56, there's quite a lot of convergence. It's just about finding the right words, maybe to improve the paragraph. And on 56, there are some additional proposals, but there is a feeling that this should be moved to areas for further discussion, and you can see if that can be worked out. So I'll have Morocco, followed by Japan.
Merci, Madame la.
Thank you very much, Madam Co-Chair. I would just like to react to what has been said on 55. Now you say, based on the final model to be adopted, so that means that will be adopted, right? So, qui sera adopté in French. So it could benefit from, depending on the final model adopted in English. So we should perhaps clarify what the final model would be that would be adopted. What are the types of models that could be adopted? And then maybe we should link it when we say depending on the final model, it could benefit. Then we need to clarify what is the link with the number of approaches under the Nagoya Protocol. Could how? And then if we talk about approaches, which types of approaches? Are we talking about models for allowing transparency on access of benefit sharing, which come from products of DSI? So the entire paragraph for me is quite general and surface level and unclear when we're talking about different mechanisms, and we need to understand what's going to follow later. We agree with adding the list of non-monetary benefits. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Morocco. Japan, followed by Republic of Korea.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On paragraph 56, we agree with the proposal made by the UK to replace the individual names of these agreements with names of the international organization like WFP, WHO. We are not quite sure about UNESCO. We are not very much aware of their activities on the issues related to DSI. And reference on paragraph 55 and 56, reference to Nagoya Protocol, as many parties suggested already, we do not think reference to Nagoya Protocol is necessary. We do not accept this reference to Nagoya Protocol. Benefit sharing from the use of DSI is out of the mandate of the Nagoya Protocol. Thank you.
Thank you. Republic of Korea, then Colombia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Actually, I forgot to say this one. As already Canada, Switzerland, EU, and Japan mentioned, Korea is not comfortable with the inclusion of the making a specific reference to obligations as well as a specific reference to specific articles in CBD or Nagoya Protocol, because it could send a wrong message or indication that DSI within the scope of CBD or Nagoya Protocol. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Colombia, followed by Indonesia.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. Regarding the paragraph 56, we agree with some of the positions from our region. We believe that it's important to mention the mechanisms themselves rather than the organizations that are behind the mechanisms. I'm not sure about what the UNESCO is doing, but if the UNESCO has a mechanism, it would be important to mention it. Regarding the paragraph 55, and well, a little bit more in general. The Nagoya Protocol is important, but again, we're talking about the different mechanisms and how they can, the lessons that can be learned. There's going to be some instances where, I mean, Nagoya understands generative resources in a way, but this is about DSI, and if we start to discuss how DSI is understood with other treaties or mechanisms, there is going to be certain differences, and reconciling those differences is just going to, I mean, lead the discussion to where it doesn't need to be. So we agreed that also perhaps not mentioning it, but mentioning a list of protocols like Nagoya, where this new mechanism could take some lessons, but not just Nagoya, but others as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Colombia. So if I get you correctly, on 55, your proposal is to indicate that a number of mechanisms that could be learned from include, for example, Nagoya Protocol, and then we would go on.
For example, I mean, in a way, 55 and the 56 sort of mention the same thing, that there are other mechanisms where we can take lessons and we can support those. I mean, we can support our mechanisms on other lessons, and, you know, it's a conversation. But not just one and not just focus on the Nagoya Protocol. This is its own mechanism. It's quote unquote independent from the others. It understands DSI in a different context. So it's important that, well, it's important, Nagoya Protocol, it's not the only one.
Okay, thank you very much. I needed that clarification. I'll give the floor to Indonesia, then Argentina.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For paragraph 55, we support the Chilean Argentinian proposal, which I think it was supported by so many, and we also support this the references to non-monetary benefits in 55, as it is clearly agreed in decision 15.9. We all on 56, we are flexible with this forum, non-forum issue, as long as they are there. I mean, the spirit is to coordination, so we are flexible with the language, including adding a WIPO in this regard, because it's clear that they're also discussing our issue in their part, so we fully support coordination with them. And on the references to Nagoya, on CBD, I'm sure nobody will object, right? While on the reference to Nagoya, we think this is also good to be considered and referred to in this paragraph, because 59 also considers Nagoya. So since 15.9, we all agree to it, we don't think there is an issue to including Nagoya in 59. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Indonesia. I give the floor to Argentina, followed by India.
Gracias, Presidenta.
Thank you very much, Co-Chair. I would like to come back to two statements that have been made with regard to including the Nagoya Protocol in this document. Firstly, I would like to touch upon the comment that was made, if I've heard correctly, that suggested that the Nagoya Protocol, and here I'm paraphrasing, not quoting, the Nagoya Protocol refers to decision 15/9. I don't really think that that is the right way that we should understand things, because the Nagoya Protocol actually came before 15.9. Yes, there are elements which are included in the decision 15.9, but still it came before. So it doesn't deny the existence of the Nagoya Protocol, neither confirms nor denies. It reaffirms it, corrects the speaker. I would like to recall the preambular paragraph of 15/9, which says that the CBD and the Nagoya Protocol, amongst other instruments on benefit sharing, are the legal framework for access to genetic resources and benefit sharing of their use. So, the reference was already included. There was already a link back to the Nagoya Protocol and the decision of COP15. Denying this link that exists would therefore be a step backwards, taking a step into the past with regard to the decision that's already been taken. So, that's why, yes, I understand that the mention of this link is something that's basically already been decided. It's not something new. It shouldn't be something that needs to be reconsidered at length because it's already present in the decision. That also goes for para 11 of the decision. So I would support the addition that has been proposed by Brazil in these paragraphs. But generally speaking, I wanted to talk about the mention of the Nagoya Protocol because, again, this is something that was agreed and which is linked to 15/9. There are things, these are items on which there's already been an agreement. Let us not forget the first paragraph of the preamble of decision 15/9. Because if we were to forget that part, then what would we do with the rest of the paragraphs? We agreed in December of 2022. Let's not forget it. It's not that long. Thanks.
Thank you, Argentina. I'll have India, then Cuba. Then I'll give the floor to the IPOCs, and then we'll see how we move forward. So India, then Cuba.
Thank you, Chair, for giving us the floor. Regarding para 55, just like to reiterate what has already been told by Brazil and by Argentina at length. What is mentioned here is that the multilateral mechanism could benefit from a number of approaches under the Nagoya Protocol. And as has been already elaborated at length by Argentina, this is already something that is already part of the decision of 15/9, and it predates that. And when we are talking about multilateral mechanism, the existence of such a mechanism under the bilateral framework under the Nagoya Protocol is something that should be considered while finalizing the multilateral mechanism. The para only talks about the benefits that one could derive out of the Nagoya Protocol, and I see no harm in retaining it there. I would also like to support the insertion made by Brazil in para 55. So coming to para 56, I would like to retain the word coordination there, and regarding the insertion that has been made about UNESCO, if UNESCO is not the entity which is dealing with all this, it should be removed. So I have no objection to that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Cuba, you have the floor.
Yeah, good afternoon, Madam Co-Chair. Cuba would like to support everything that has been stated by Brazil, but more specifically, the re-inclusion of the two paragraphs that were deleted from the non-paper in its version number 2, concerning the references to the Nagoya Protocol. We believe that at the contact group where the subject was broached, it was made clear that this had to be in some part of the document. These references had to be included because in many parts of the document there are references to different aspects of Decision 15/9, and we fail to see why reference cannot be made to the correlation between the mechanism and the Nagoya Protocol. We see no contradiction in mentioning this linkage again, and furthermore recognizing the rights and obligations of the parties. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me just consult with my co-chair. Okay, was just consulting with my co-chair, and I see that the list has grown longer. I had intended to stop the interventions on Cuba, who have just spoken, because looking at the interventions so far, from our recollection on paragraphs 55 and 56, for paragraph 55, there seemed to be agreement that we would need some of the examples, but not too clear about the mention of the Nagoya Protocol, as Colombia said, the isolation of the Nagoya Protocol. So our proposal is to include those proposals on reference to monetary benefits, which a lot of people have supported, and customary law, which I think Korea and others indicated, but move these paragraphs to elements for further discussion. For paragraph 56, there seems to be agreement or convergence on the first part of the paragraph, where Chile proposed to include cooperation, and South Africa and others still wanted to retain coordination. So the proposal is to have both cooperation and coordination to reflect those views. And then delete a solution on because it was supported, and then continue with the paragraph, but also refer to forums rather than agreements, which was also supported. Delete the reference to UNESCO and include reference to WIPO. Now on this paragraph, the area where we seem to still have need for discussion is on the last part, where Chile proposed reference to what was in decision 15/9, and then we have the Brazilian proposal. So maybe we'll move on, and if possible, as we make further discussion, it can be an area where maybe a small group could meet and then find a common solution on the last part. But if there is no agreement on the last part, we'll move that last part of this paragraph to areas for further consideration, because the first part of the paragraph is generally agreed, and we'll find a way of reflecting that in that way if we will not have agreement. Then there is also a proposal by Brazil to introduce 2 paragraphs that were in the non-paper that are referring to the Nagoya Protocol, which existed in the non-paper. So the first paragraph is the multilateral mechanism could benefit from, so the first paragraph is already what is in paragraph 55. And the second one is the multilateral mechanism should not undermine the rights and responsibilities which exist under the Nagoya Protocol, which was something that was in the non-paper. So we propose to move that way for now so that we can be able to move forward. That's how we intend to move forward on this. I'll have the IPLCs and then move to the other segments of the paragraph from 57. So IPLCs, then women. IPLCs, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for making time for our comments. We just have a couple of notes here. In paragraph 56, we strongly support the retention of the references to the Nagoya Protocol and community protocols. We're still negotiating the nature of the mechanism, particularly in relation to data governance and areas that are obligatory or voluntary. Community protocols can provide data users with information and metadata about their expectations for the treatment of DSI derived from species with sacred, spiritual, or other cultural values. At a minimum, these can be voluntarily taken into account through partnerships or other activities with Indigenous people and local communities. In paragraph 57, the IIFB supports the inclusion of references to WIPO and UNESCO. While its work is not specifically on benefit sharing, it's doing work that's related to data governance. The paragraph in the text only refers to benefit sharing, but we believe that coordination with other forums on issues of DSI, on genetic resources, should include all the issues that the CBD has taken up. And this includes data governance and provides a more holistic view on the regulatory landscape on this issue. Therefore, we suggest retaining the reference to UNESCO and amending the text to state that there needs to be strong ongoing coordination and cooperation with the other forums that are considering a solution on benefit sharing and data governance from the use of digital sequence information on genetic resources. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll have women.
Thank you very much, Madam Co-Chair. I speak on behalf of the CDB Women Caucus. In line with Argentina's and IFB participation proposal, I would like to mention that the decision 59, paragraph 11 says that the fair and equitable sharing does not affect the existing rights and obligations under the convention, including those relate to the traditional knowledge and the rights of IPLCs. With regard to the community protocols, those instruments have been important to strengthen the full and effective participation of indigenous peoples and local communities, women in the protection of their lands, territories, and resources, traditional knowledge, and associated with genetic resources. And as I have been mentioned, could be documents that bring advice in all the activities proposed by this working group in regard of indigenous people and local communities, with special interest for the inclusion of women of those peoples and communities, indigenous peoples and local communities, who are critical knowledge holders of traditional knowledge related with genetic resources, and also links local governance structures and national governance national governments. We ask for support of the parties to keep this crucial reference. And thank you, Madam Co-Chair.
Thank you. I would like to ask parties for the support of the IPLC. Parties who support IPLC statement. I see Uganda. And women, okay, I see lots of party support. Now, I had made a proposal on the way to move forward just before we had taken the interventions from the IPOCs and women. So I would just like to get from the room comments on that proposal as a way of moving forward, because we have understood the different views on those paragraphs, and like indicated for paragraph 55, we have proposed to move it to areas for further discussion. The changes in paragraph 56 on the first part seem to be agreeable for all. I think with the intervention just made by the IPLCs, it looks like they still want to retain UNESCO in reference in this paragraph. And then there is that last part where we have proposals from Brazil and Chile and others, which there seem to be no convergence, and we are proposing that if we still don't find convergence on that, we just move that last part to the areas for further discussion. So I'll just get a few parties just to react on the way forward. So I have a long list here, but I just want to make sure that it's about responding to this proposal of moving us forward. All right, so I have on the list DRC, Togo, then EU. DRC. Hope to respond to the way forward.
Merci.
Thank you very much, Madam Co-Chair, for giving me the floor. With regard to the way forward, given that, well, let's say we supported the preservation of 55 and the amendment of 56. Given that there doesn't seem to be consensus on 55, I would propose, or I was proposing, that we could perhaps postpone them, put 55 onto the part that we're going to continue to discuss later on, but that the reference to the Nagoya Protocol be kept in. There you have it.
Thank you. Togo, then EU.
Merci.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. On 56, I agree with your proposal, but keeping UNESCO in, well, we still need to hear the arguments why, because we're not trying to broaden the list of institutions. There are many institutions, we don't know if it's relevant or not. We don't see what the link is with UNESCO here. Then on 55, I support my colleague from the DRC. I'd just like to mention a number of arguments for the preservation. So first of all, for example, a number of states parties, for example, Argentina, have said that the decision 15.9, which is a subject of deliberation here, was already mentioned in the annex of the Nagoya Protocol. And I said yesterday that in the decision of 15.9, it was completely taken into 15.4 in the Nagoya Protocol at the COP for the Nagoya Protocol, correct speaker. So within the CBD and also within the Nagoya Protocol, there are discussions. I've heard some people say that the Nagoya Protocol doesn't talk about DSI, but I would actually request that you look back at that decision. DSI is mentioned, and I'm afraid that we're just, postponing this issue, but we aren't having the courage here to keep in 55. I think that going back to another, or putting it off to another meeting later is just going to continue the same thing over and over again. So I think that the paragraph needs to be considered, and so I would lean towards convergence and consensus, and I would link it with Paris 61. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you. EU.
Thank you very much, co-chairs. And I think it's fair to say that we are now in the debate on the reinterpretation of Decision 59, and I don't find it useful to enter into a long exchange. Suffice it to say that Decision 15/9 is prefaced by a statement saying recognizes that there are divergences of views with regard to the scope of the convention with regard to DSI, which actually is the entry point for all this, that 15/9 is a pragmatic decision where we decided to move forward and work on a practical solution to the issue of benefit sharing from genetic resources. So I think we can all throw paragraphs, selected paragraphs from the decision at each other. It's not going to bring us any further. So, and I think that it was very clear that the reason we had decision 59 was because, and we still have, radically different opinions on to what extent DSI fall under the scope of the convention, as some say, others on the scope of the protocols, as others say. So I think we are not here to solve that, and we're not able to solve that. And all the attempts to pepper the text with references to the Nagoya Protocol will not help. So I think that we need to be practical, because I think we have a couple of minutes left before interpretation goes out. And I think we actually have a lot of agreement here, which hides behind different interventions, but I really think we have convergence on many things. The way I understood our discussion, we have full convergence on paragraph 55 for the first sentence and the last bit of sentence, including the insertion requested by Brazil on the list of monetary benefits. I also thought I heard earlier say, the co-chair, that the part in the middle that says could benefit from a number of approaches under the Nagoya Protocol, such as community protocols, would be moved to the issues for further discussions, and we're perfectly okay with that. I think we have almost full agreement on paragraph 56 with the very good proposals made by Chile and by the additions made to that proposal by the African group. I think that we also have a full agreement among the parties that we would not want to mention UNESCO. I think that the only area of disagreement on paragraph 56 are the Brazilian proposals to add different elements related to the Nagoya Protocol and the Convention. And I think to make our life easier, if they really insist on having that, let's move it to the issues for further consideration and see how that helps there. With that, I think moving on could be relatively easy, because I think on the rest, we have, I think, real agreement on all of those things. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. I'll only take the last two countries that have not spoken before. So I'll have China, then Uganda, and then we are almost close to the finish because the interpretation will go off. China and Uganda.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. First, we would like to apologize. When you said you closed the list, then I pressed the button. Now we are approaching lunchtime. I would like to talk about 56 concerning UNESCO. On this issue, I would like to provide some information. The 41st session of UNESCO adopted a document concerning the share and fair implementation of the science at all levels. We believe that this proposal is closely related to DSI. Actually, in our decision 59, in the preamble, the last paragraph 4, we also recognized this document of UNESCO. So we would like to keep UNESCO in this paragraph. And also concerning the proposal of UK about increasing the other forums, we should be open about it. And also we support the proposal by Madam Co-Chair for moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Uganda. And then I think we have 5 more minutes before we close. So I'll only take the parties that have not spoken. And I think Switzerland as well have not spoken on this issue. So Uganda, you have the floor.
Okay, thanks, Co-Chair. Our intervention here is mainly on 55 first. This I think I would say that I am rather disappointed by the approach that is being taken by the working group. It is agreed that there are divergent views on the scope of DSI, and this was already noted by 59. However, the working group can borrow lessons, can get lessons from anywhere, even beyond the CBD. 55, para 55, does not in any way try to put DSI under the Nagoya Protocol. Para 55 is just referring to approaches that could be, it could be from WHO, it could be from wherever. So I think that I would invite our colleagues to look at every instance when the Nagoya Protocol is mentioned, the import of the Nagoya Protocol in that situation. Because for this case, this paragraph does not in any way try to put DSI under the Nagoya Protocol. Rather, it is just looking for best practices wherever they are. We could actually omit putting Nagoya Protocol here and put other cases where we can get best practices for benefit sharing. And then secondly, we would like to support China and the women group and the IPLCs that UNESCO, if they have lessons that can be borrowed by this working group, well, we can include them. It is not that we are looking at DSI per se here. If they have lessons that we can borrow, then we can include them. So, Chair, my concern is that the trend that is being taken is that any mention of Nagoya Protocol is not welcome in the document. I think that's a worrying trend. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Switzerland.
Thank you, Co-Chair. I just want to make a short, very specific comment. So on paragraph 56, where you mentioned that the first part, there's seems to be a lot of convergence, and we also agree with this. However, we have still a concern regarding the exact formulation that these different fora are considering benefit sharing from the use of DSI. And so in particular, in our view, WIPO is, for example, not working on a solution for benefit sharing from DSI, and therefore we would just make a small amendment that we would add, like, that are considering benefit sharing from the use of digital sequence information, genetic resources, or related issues. And I think with this we ought to cover all these concerns that not all the fora may work on the same issue, but on related issues, of course, of DSI. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Switzerland. Let me just check on the time. Okay, so we don't have any more time. So moving forward on this paragraph, we have heard your views. We have seen where we seem to converge and where we seem to have divergences. So we'll proceed and we'll prepare some text in the next document that reflects the views that we have heard on this paragraph.
The interpretation service is now ending. The interpretation service is now ending.
All right, thank you very much. So we encourage you, because for these paragraphs that we have spent an hour looking at, there are just a few issues remaining for agreeing on convergence. So we encourage those parties, if you could at least try in the corridors to find some common language on this, it will be very helpful for us. And we note that we haven't attempted to discuss paragraphs 57 to 61. However, the time we had for discussing this CRP was this morning, and we'll carry paragraphs 56, 57 to 61 as they are to CRP 3, noting that they haven't yet been discussed. And we will be able to resume around 3:30 to look at the CRP 3 based on the work we did yesterday as well as what we have done today. And it may not be exactly 3:30, but that's the proposed time for now. So we just encourage you to watch out on the screen the actual time that we meet again. So that's the way in terms of moving forward. I think my co-chair has something to add.
Thank you very much, everyone, for a very good conversation today. We said earlier we'd establish a small group discussion on paragraphs 50, 51, and 51 bis. And that is open to all, but I'd encourage, please, Norway, the European Union, Brazil, Argentina, Indonesia, and Japan to take part in that conversation, but it's open to all. And that conversation will take place in room 15 at 2:15. So just outside at 2:15. No, it's upstairs. It's upstairs at 2:15. So room 15 at 2:15. Thank you, everyone.